Decoy destroyed!
You have been targeted for elimination.
Come on! Try next time! Can't put it here!
Hey guys, welcome to the Engineer class guide for Gears of War 4 Horde, and I've saved this one for last because, if I'm being fully transparent here, this is my weakest class. I tend to struggle with power maintenance in most of my builds and can tend to get carried away by trying to shoot enemies as I would any other class. However, I'll still share what I've learned to the best of my ability. As usual, I'll go over the weapons, when to play as an engineer, card layouts, and some do's and don'ts of the class. When it comes to weaponry, the engineer starts out with an enforcer, an asher, and a repair tool. And because an engineer has no weapon perks whatsoever, they have no strengths in any particular weapon, you're free to swap out your guns apart from the repair tool, of which I highly encourage you keep, for whatever you want. Personally, I lean into heavies weapons when it comes to my weapon selection, so if I can get a drop shot for moderately close range stuff and then like a torque bow for long range headshots, it's a pretty good combination. I also find myself seeking out just the regular Lancer for how well it ranges down Sentinel and Guardian shields. This is totally based off of how you play, so your weapons are totally your choice. However, I will continually recommend the drop shot above anything else just because that thing is just crazy bloated in damage. It doesn't matter if you're a heavy or not. If you get direct hits on enemies, it just does so much damage. As far as when to play as an engineer, there aren't many situations where you don't want one on your team. It's debatable in variation modes like boss rush if the team agrees to go with perhaps maybe multiple scouts or wants to go a bit more of an old school nomadic build, as I like to call it, which, if you don't know what I mean by nomadic, that just means you don't build much and you keep your team on the move. I've seen people have success stories with this, like when Boss Rush was first coming out, and like a map like Dam, for example, they would just run around the map and have little tiny safe deposits, and whenever their stuff got destroyed, they would just move on. But I digress. As well, there are specific times when you would want to build 2 engineers, and while it's rare, there are speedruns that can really benefit from 2 engineers, as well as then 2 engineers organizing their discounts and health cards can be really beneficial. The thing to worry about with 2 or more NGs though is the lack of damage on the players themselves. So in a case where if all the fortifications get destroyed by like some well-placed Swarmac rockets, or a carrier comes in and ground pounds in a really bad spot and you guys are low on power until the scout is able to run out, an engineer does very little damage in comparison to your heavy, your sniper, or your soldier in that case. Okay, so card layouts. There are so many ways to lay out your cards for an engineer. Like you guys remember the scout guide, the first video I made? That's easy. A general layout with a little wiggle room for interpretation, right? That's nice. I like that. Engineer is totally based around how you want to play and how you want the match to unfold. So I'm going to start with my build and go from there. So for a while on stream, I was trying to figure out what my comfort build is. Like I had a moment where I felt like I forgot it from what it was back in the day after we had a bunch of changes and I just didn't play engineer as much. So after experimentation, my go-to build has become repair boost, overclock, sentry cost, decoy health. And honestly, this could change on the fly, but from a lot of engineer matches that we were playing, I was paying attention to what I like, and I found that spamming decoys was my great go-to. For the longest time, I did the same thing with barricades having fortification health and barrier cost on instead of your decoy cards, to which I enjoyed, and I got a lot of kills, and we'd have some enemies die pretty fast, to which a lot of the community got me on the mindset, though, that barricades are good for slowing down enemies, but it doesn't divert their fire. So if I don't want to be like a kill hog, and if I want to make sure my teammates are staying safe from my fortifications, that was one of those moments where I went, you know what, community, you're right. Decoys kind of are a better way to go. And once I got used to it, then I found out how much more useful it was for me. And with this build, I also try to not be obnoxious with sentries because I want my teammates to get kills and do their own work. The sentry cost is for building a backline in what I call the I'll be damned area is what I could refer to it to. This is where at a point on the map in spawn, we'll have our area for our last stand. And in that area, and pretty much that area only, I'll put down an abundant amount of sentries because if we need to fall back this far, I'll be damned if they can kill us. You see? You see what I'm doing there? And this engineer guide took a little while to figure out how I want to go about presenting information to you guys, and the best way that I think is just to teach you guys how to get your own build. And it came down to this. I want you guys to answer these questions for yourself. If you don't know what your engineer build is, just ask yourself these questions. 1. Can you trust your teammates to do damage? And I'll leave that question at assuming that you're a friendly person and you don't want to hog all the kills with a million sentries everywhere, which makes the match completely boring for your teammates. But if you can't trust your teammates to do damage, then you may want to go on the safe side and have some cards dedicated to sentry discounts and ammo. That way you're providing that damage that isn't being done by your other teammates. 2. What mode are you playing? So if you're playing Tracker Ball, Juvie Madness, One Shot, One Kill, barricades and decoys have 1 HP and are utterly useless as a result. So don't have barricades on or decoy cost and health cards overall, because they're not going to do much for you. Although thinking about it, I wonder if you could attempt like a rapid fire fabricator leveling technique with barricades and decoys in those modes. That's something for another video. That's something I'll have to experiment with. 3. How many heavies do you have on your team? If you have 1, you may not need to consider throwing overclock on. Just buy a few weapons lockers, let the scout and heavy get 2 or 3 drop shots, and the heavy will be all good to go. I've tried this and I experimented with this as a heavy, just being an absolute hog of ammo. If a juvie ran by, I would shoot a drop shot at it. That type of lack of ammo conservation, and I was still fine with about 3 drop shots overall. However, if you have 2 or more heavies, overclock is definitely a great consideration. Especially in the early game, to have ammo coming back to your damage dealers as fast as possible is a big deal. When you don't have any of your fortifications built, they're your damage, they're your line of defense, so having their ammo ready is paramount. I call out heavies because I seem to have an easy time as a sniper or soldier, not needing to use a weapons locker as much, maybe taking 1 or 2 spots at best, and that was on a sniper. Soldiers I've had the easiest time with just managing with whatever's on the land with hammer burst and lancers and what have you. In many cases, I can just go without weapons lockers on those 2 classes. And question number 4, last one, is do you want to repair your fortifications or do you want to replace them? So if you're going to be repairing them, obviously repair boost is a really great perk to have, especially in the late game, because not having it on is miserable. They really nerfed the rate of which level 4 sentries and level 4 turrets and level 4 barricades and stuff like this repair, and their repair rate is painfully slow, especially when you're hitting 2.5 times damage enemies are unloading on these fortifications. It's almost impossible to maintain without repair boost. But the other way I've gone about it is build a lot of discount cards and put like a ton of decoys and barricades down. Then when one breaks, all you got to do is put 1 or 2 in its place, and that's where I call it like the recycling or the replacement build, is you don't really focus that much on repairing them, you just kind of put things out and let them go. Both ways are totally viable, but it's totally up to you on how you want to approach it for your own personal success. There are loads of ways to build your card layouts, and what I did to find my comfort area is to just jump in with what I think is best and then see what problems I'm encountering partway through the game. So like, oh man, decoys are dying in seconds, maybe look to some health cards. Your teammates aren't keeping up with their damage, go with more sentry cards, maybe get some turrets out, so on, so forth. And now on to the do's and the don'ts. First do, make a plan based off of the map. So by default, most people that I see go engineer, they'll choose to build in the spawns of most maps. And while that's a decent way to go for most maps, there's potentially so much better ways to go about it. The biggest example that I give is Clock Tower, where Clock Tower does really well if you build on top of the staircases with only a few fortifications built on each side. I believe I usually go 4 barricades kind of in a square formation, then 2 sentry guns looking on each side, or if you didn't want to be as kill hoggy, maybe do 1 on each side, 1 to 2 decoys on each side, and then weapons lockers, and that's really all you need, and then the rest is totally extra and up to you. Once you find a setup on each map that you like, which you can always watch more of our videos here for a completely shameless plug, remember that build plan when it comes up in matchmaking or playing in private lobbies so you can have a much more effective way of winning your matches. Second do, use your fortifications for safety. And I usually call this the wall of safety. The concept is if you're lining up sentry guns or decoys or weapons lockers near a wall, give yourself a little bit of room behind them. So like just give a little bit of a gap between the fortification and the wall. Then you take cover on the wall and you just crouch down when you're repairing them. So your fortifications will cover you a bit as you're going about repairing and maintaining things, so you're not out in the open or you don't have to use flow. Third do is to give your team breathing room. And what I mean by this is a lot of times the fortifications are your line between life and death. So if you have a line of barricades that is like the farthest out, that's where the enemies are running into that barricade at all times. That's kind of the line into no man's land that your team generally won't cross until they know it's safe. With that in mind, if you put them really close to the back of your spawn, that leaves you with only that much space and you're basically fish in a barrel, and you want to be really careful about that because you're just going to get cluster killed a lot. So make sure you give your team some more pieces of cover, make them have the ability to spread out effectively. Basically, so they're far enough away from each other. If a boom shot hits one of them, it's only going to down or kill one of them. But make sure they're close enough that whenever that person gets down, it's a really quick and easy recovery process. Fourth do, although this is a bit of a don't as well, is do give the scout proper running paths. The don't way of saying this is don't cluster truck. I know I'm avoiding swearing in an M-rated game with loads of violence and swearing, but either way, happens a lot on maps like Mercy, Rustlung, or Clock Tower, where the engineer will build so many fortifications everywhere that the team has no room to move in and around the base easily. And I've seen this fail waves, although I don't have footage for it because you don't think these things through when you're angrily deleting footage because you got body blocked by 20 sentries. But make sure you have pathways cleared that can be easily run through. Either way, so the scout can get to the fabricator and teammates easily. And the simple way of testing this is just whenever you set something in place, just run right through it real quick. Make sure you can run through that easily because the scout will very much appreciate that. And now on to the don'ts.
How's that fun working out for you?
First don't, and it's probably my favorite. Don't be that guy. You know the one that builds 50 sentries in the base. Oh, well, we're guaranteed to win and get that XP. Just don't. Unless you're doing a specific speed run, don't. Why don't? Let's see. When you put that many sentries up with all the muzzle flares and the particle effects, it overloads my PC. I'm on a PC that's stronger than an Xbox One X, let alone an Xbox. So people playing on a regular Xbox One play at 5 frames per second because of this. That isn't fun. On top of this non-fun, even if they have a GTX 2080 Ti, those trying to shoot through the sentry gun muzzle flares can be a pain. Being in front of them makes you a meat shield for inanimate objects, which is dumb, and generally you can't race against an army of 50 sentry gun kills to get top kills on your team. Plus maintaining all of that is not fun. Don't do it. Don't be the sentry hog. Nobody likes it. That was cathartic. That felt good. Second don't fortification block your teammates. Watch your angles on where you lay your fortifications. There have been a lot of barricades, decoys, and sentries that are placed a little too close to a piece of cover, where Heavy might have to start moving out of his cover to get clear shots, or what I've seen a lot of times is they'll try and shoot in cover, the drop shot will reflect off of the sentry gun, and they'll end up blowing themselves up because they're trying to shoot around your fortification. There's very easy maneuvers you can do to just ensure people get a clear line of sight alongside of keeping your defenses up. Just keep in mind your teammates and where you're placing your stuff in accordance to their cover. Third, don't overextend to repair your stuff. We all do this. We all throw barricades and decoys really far out, and that's not a bad strategy. But their life doesn't equal yours. Like, sacrificing yourself to go out and repair that barricade is not the way to go versus you being able to stay back and stay alive. And this is one thing that I screw up more than I'd care to admit. This is definitely my most guilty. This is the don't be Cherry type of moment. But I'll run right out into enemies that are approaching me to try and repair something really quick. But believe me when I say do as I say and not as I do, it's easier to let that fortification go and just buy a replacement if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, just pick up a gun and start doing damage to whatever is assaulting your barricades. Fourth don't, and this one's kind of a do. Don't forget about Sentinels and Guardians, and what I mean by this is what I see people do with sentries. So they'll put their barricades and decoys on the front lines, and immediately right behind them will be their sentry guns, right? Trying to get the most range out of it. Understandable. Well, this works well until two Sentinels end up gliding right behind them, don't take enough damage from the sentry guns to lose their shields or to take on any damage, and then they just go and they take the flank on your teammates and unload all hellfire on them. Have some layers set up to your fortifications so your teammates can stay safe. Yeah, I actually like the way that sounds. If I were making this a do, it would be to add layers of fortifications. Like, could have swapped it, but I'm already writing this and I'm already committing to it, and now I'm voicing it over, so yeah, I'm sticking with that. But this is where I really like having those sentries that sit in the back line, that I'll be damned build. So if you do have Sentinels and Guardians that do want to flank everything, then those guys are going to be my eyes. They're going to be watching everything behind me, and a lot of times those have saved my life. And that is my engineer guide. And with that, I've gone through all of the classes and my recommendations. These took way too long to do, and that's all on my end. I went through a lot during the time of making these. But looking forward at what I want to do with Gears content, I'm going to be finding easier ways to make more guides and advice for Horde, and I'm just going to talk a little about that now while you're here watching this. Just hear me out. Part of these guides is going to continue in the form of Instagram videos. In quick little 1-minute snippets is how they have their videos set up by default. And I've been making these single slices of tips where it's like a single do or a single don't or whatever I think about that I don't mention in these guides, and any information that's a quick like, ooh, that's a good idea, I should share that out. I want to have an easier way of making quick bite-sized content, so I'll start with that. But what I'm thinking is, if you're not an Instagram person, I'll do compilations of those and put them on YouTube or something like that. The idea is still kind of coming along, at least on how I'm going to port this over to YouTube, but we'll see how that ends up going. As well, with Gears 5 getting rapidly closer, I'm debating on what, if any of this, I'm going to make for Gears 4, or if I'm going to just save it for Gears 5 at this point. But I'm looking into a lot of guides on every element of Horde that I can think of, and I've looked around and I don't see really anybody doing the type of content I have in mind, and I'm going to just keep it at that for now. And again, I'm going to try and find more efficient ways of doing this, so whenever you guys see the new series that I'm thinking of, it's hopefully not going to be one of these things where I'm gone for 9 months on these guides. This is what I'm working on, and this is what I've been really planning and preparing. We'll just kind of take it by ear. Is that a phrase? But either way, yeah. But thank you guys for all of this. The support I've gotten from the Gears community and the coalition themselves has been absolutely amazing. You've given me a solid home base here, and I'm grateful as all get out for that. I really am. I'm continuing to make content for Gears 4 because there's things I need to keep practicing and improving when it comes to making videos. This is so when Gears 5 comes out, or other games we fall in love with come out of the blue, I can take the concepts that I've learned here and use them with anything, but also it's because I've grown up with Gears. Like Gears 1 back in 2007 was when I got it? Yeah. I was crazy addicted to it, and that really got me on the itch to start making a lot of videos and taking things more seriously. Like, Gears of War has always been a backbone for me when it comes to content. So thank you for the community, thank you to the coalition, and I mean Epic Games for what they started and what the coalition's picked up. I really look forward to seeing what the future brings with Gears 5 and what the whole franchise of Gears is going to be as a whole, and I'm happy to make content for this as much as I can. Thank you everybody for watching, and until next time, as always, stay thirsty, my friends.